The Sorting Hat touched her head, and the world split in two. Hermione Granger had read every book about Hogwarts that existed in the public record. She knew the sorting ceremony by heart. She knew the four houses and their histories and their famous alumni. She had spent the entire train ride practicing spells she had memorized from the Standard Book of Spells Grade 1 and correcting Neville Longbottom on the proper pronunciation of Wingardium Leviosa before he had even tried to cast it. She was ready for Gryffindor. She was ready for Ravenclaw. She was prepared for every possibility except the one that actually happened. The Hat's voice whispered in her ear, not aloud, not for the hall to hear, but inside her mind where no one else could reach. Interesting, it said. Very interesting. A mind like a library. The Hat's voice whispered in her ear, not aloud, not for the hall to hear, but inside her mind where no one else could reach. Interesting, it said. Very interesting. A mind like a library, every fact catalogued, every rule memorized, every equation solved before it is even asked. Ravenclaw would love you. Rowena herself would applaud. Hermione's heart swelled. Ravenclaw. Yes, that made sense. But the Hat was not finished. And yet, it continued, there is something else, something beneath the books and the rules and the desperate need to prove yourself. You do not just want to know things, you want to use them. You want power, not for its own sake perhaps, but power nonetheless. You want to change things, you want to be seen. You would do almost anything to never feel small again. Hermione's hands gripped the stool. And that, the Hat said, is the mark of Slytherin. The great hall held its breath. Slytherin. The word echoed off the stern walls. The table draped in green and silver did not applaud at first. They stared. Muggle-born, bushy-haired, teeth too big and hand already shooting up before the stool stopped moving. She was the least Slytherin person any of them had ever seen. And then the clapping started, slow, deliberate, sarcastic. Draco Malfoy sat near the head of the table, clapping with theatrical elegance, a smirk spreading across his pale face. "Welcome," he said, as she sat down across from him, "to the House of Ambition. Try not to cry." Hermione did not cry. She did not flinch. She looked Draco Malfoy directly in the eye and filed away every detail of his face for future reference. She had been bullied before. She had been called names before. She had spent her entire childhood being told she was too much and not enough at the exact same time. Slytherin had no idea what it had just accepted. The first week was the hardest week of her life. The Slytherin common room was beneath the Black Lake, a long dungeon of greenish light and leather sofas and silver serpents carved into every surface. The windows looked out into the dark water where fish drifted past like silent spectators. It was beautiful in a way that Hermione had not expected, cold and elegant and utterly indifferent to her presence. The girls in her dormitory did not speak to her. Pansy Parkinson and Daphne Greengrass and Millicent Bulstrode shared a room with a Muggle-born and treated her like a stain on the carpet. They whispered when she entered. They fell silent when she approached. They moved her trunk from the foot of her bed to the corner by the door while she was in the bathroom, and when she found it there, she did not complain. She simply moved it back and cast a locking charm she had learned from a book that was strictly meant for third years. The next morning her trunk was still there, and the girls were looking at her differently. Hermione learned the rules of Slytherin quickly. Power was the only currency that mattered. Knowledge was power, but only if you wielded it. Being right was worthless if no one feared the consequences of crossing you. The house did not care about fairness or bravery or even intelligence in the abstract. It cared about results. It cared about who came out on top. So Hermione started coming out on top. In potions, she answered every question Snape threw at the class before Malfoy could open his mouth. In charms, she levitated her feather on the first attempt while the rest of the room struggled. In transfiguration, she turned her match into a needle that was sharper and more precise than any other in the class, and when McGonagall awarded her points, Hermione made sure to catch Pansy Parkinson's eye. It was not about showing off, it was about survival. She was a lion cub in a pit of serpents, and the only thing keeping her alive was the fact that she was smarter than all of them combined. The first alliance she formed was unexpected. Theodore Nott was a quiet boy with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes. He did not speak much. He did not participate in Malfoy's campaign of whispered insults and petty humiliations. He sat at the back of every class and took notes in flawless handwriting, and never once looked at Hermione like she did not belong. She approached him in the library. It was neutral ground, a place where house rivalries were supposed to dissolve under the weight of academic pursuit. He was reading a book on advanced arithmancy that was not even on the first-year syllabus. "You are reading ahead," Hermione said. It was not a question. Theodore looked up. His expression was unreadable. "So are you," he said. That was not a question either. They studied together that night, and the next, and the next. Theodore never asked about her parents or her blood status or why she was in Slytherin. He was interested in one thing and one thing only, whether she could keep up with him intellectually. She could. She could do more than keep up. She could push him, challenge him, force him to think in directions he had never considered. By the end of the first term, they had an arrangement. Not friendship exactly. That word was too soft for Slytherin. But an alliance. They shared notes. They proofread each other's essays. When Malfoy tried to hex Hermione in the corridor, Theodore stepped out of the shadows and reminded Malfoy very quietly that his father and Malfoy's father did business together, and it would be a shame if something disrupted that relationship. Malfoy backed off. He did not stop entirely. He was too much his father's son for that. But he learned to be more careful. And Hermione learned something valuable. In Slytherin, you did not need friends. You needed leverage. Year 2 changed everything. The Chamber of Secrets was opened, and suddenly Hermione Granger, muggle-born, bushy-haired, sitting in the middle of the house of Salazar Slytherin, was the most vulnerable person in Hogwarts. The heir of Slytherin was hunting people like her. And the heir, according to every whispered conversation in the common room, was doing the noble work of the founder's will. Malfoy was insufferable. He did not bother hiding his glee. Every attack on a muggle-born student he took as a personal victory. He read the Daily Prophet articles aloud in the common room, savouring every word about the chamber and the monster and the purification of the school. Hermione listened to all of it. She catalogued every comment, every smirk, every knowing glance. She did not argue. She did not protest. She simply watched, and she learned. When she figured out that the monster was a basilisk and that it was travelling through the pipes, she did not tell Harry Potter or Ron Weasley. She did not run to Dumbledore. She went to Professor Snape. "You know what is hunting the students," she said. It was not a question. Snape's office was dark and lined with jars of preserved things. He looked at her across his desk with an expression she could not read. It was the same expression he had worn when she was sorted something between curiosity and calculation and a very old grief. "I suspect," he said slowly, "that you have already deduced the answer yourself. So why are you here?" "Because I need permission," Hermione said, "to investigate. And I cannot ask for it publicly without making myself a target." Snape studied her for a long moment. "You are a Slytherin," he said. "I am aware." "Then you understand that permission is not something that is given. It is something that is taken. If you wish to investigate, investigate. And if you are caught, I will deny this conversation ever happened." Hermione nodded. It was exactly what she had expected him to say. It was, she realized, exactly what she would have said in his position. She investigated, quietly, carefully. She spent hours in the library tracing the history of the chamber and the lineage of Salazar Slytherin's descendants. She cross-referenced the dates of every attack with the movements of every student who had been acting strangely. She narrowed the list of suspects down to a single name, a name she was certain would break Harry Potter's heart if she told him. She told him anyway. She found Harry and Ron in an empty classroom 3 days before the end of term. She laid out her evidence, the diary, the memories, the timeline. She spoke without emotion, without hesitation, the way a prosecutor presents a case to a jury. Ron looked sick. Harry looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. "Hagrid," Ron said weakly. "It cannot be." "It is not Hagrid," Hermione said. "It is Tom Riddle. And Tom Riddle is not who you think he is." She told them everything. She told them about the name Tom Marvolo Riddle and what it spelled when you rearranged the letters. She told them about the diary and the memory and the basilisk. And when she finished speaking, Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the most famous person in the wizarding world, looked at her with something that was very close to fear. "How do you know all this?" he asked. "I am a Slytherin," Hermione said. "Figuring out secrets is what we do." Year 3 was the year of the werewolf. Hermione figured out Professor Lupin's secret before October was over. The timing of his absences matched the lunar cycle exactly. The wolfsbane potion brewing in Snape's private stores was not for the 6th-year curriculum. And Lupin's reaction when Snape assigned an essay on werewolves, the way his face went pale, the way his hands tightened on the desk, confirmed everything she suspected. She kept the secret. It was not her secret to tell. And she understood, perhaps better than anyone else in the school, what it meant to carry a truth that could destroy you if it got out. When Sirius Black broke into the castle on Halloween, Hermione was the first person to question the official story. A mass murderer who had evaded capture for 12 years, suddenly risking everything to enter a school protected by Dementors. It did not add up. The logic was flawed. The narrative was incomplete. She started her own investigation. Not because she was brave, though she was, but because the version of events being presented to the public was intellectually insulting. Facts were being ignored. Evidence was being suppressed. Someone was hiding something, and Hermione Granger could not abide an unsolved puzzle. She found the truth 3 months before Harry did. Peter Pettigrew was alive. Sirius Black was innocent. And Remus Lupin had been keeping silent about both of these facts, while a dangerous animagus roamed the castle grounds disguised as a pet rat. She confronted Lupin in his office. She did not bring Harry or Ron. She came alone, with a folder of evidence and a timeline, and a list of questions that left no room for evasion. "You knew," she said. Lupin looked at her. The firelight caught the grey in his hair and the lines around his eyes. "I suspected," he said quietly. "Then why did you not say anything?" "Fear," Lupin said. "Cowardice. The same things that keep all of us from doing what we know is right. I did not want to admit that I had been lying to Dumbledore for 12 years. I did not want to face what that would cost me." Hermione put the folder on his desk. "That is not good enough," she said. "It is not," Remus Lupin agreed. His voice was barely a whisper. 3 days later, Sirius Black was exonerated. The truth came out in a confrontation in the Shrieking Shack that involved a time-turner and a hippogriff, and one of the most complicated series of events Hermione had ever engineered. When it was over, Harry had a godfather, and Peter Pettigrew was in Azkaban, and the entire wizarding world was forced to admit that they had convicted an innocent man without a trial. Hermione Granger. Slytherin, Muggle-born, 15 years old. Had rewritten the justice system of magical Britain from a desk in the Hogwarts library. Year 4 brought the Triwizard Tournament and the return of Lord Voldemort. Harry's name coming out of the Goblet of Fire was clearly a trap. Hermione knew it the moment Dumbledore read the slip of parchment. Someone had put Harry's name in for a reason, and that reason was almost certainly connected to the same dark wizard who had been trying to kill him since he was an infant. The other Slytherins celebrated. A Gryffindor champion, their rival's glory, was a humiliation they would normally resent. But a Gryffindor champion who was almost certainly going to die in the tournament? That was entertainment. Malfoy made Potter Stinks badges and distributed them throughout the school. The Slytherin common room filled with green light and cruel laughter, and the smell of victory that had not yet arrived but felt inevitable. Hermione stood in the middle of it all and said nothing. She was playing a longer game. She spent the year positioning herself. She built alliances with the children of Death Eaters, not because she agreed with them, not because she liked them, but because information was power, and the pureblood families had information that could save Harry's life. She smiled at Pansy Parkinson and traded study notes with Daphne Greengrass and drank tea with Theodore's mother when she visited Hogsmeade. She became indispensable to people who would have cheerfully seen her murdered 5 years earlier. And she listened. She heard the whispers about the Dark Lord's return. She heard the names, the families that were already preparing, the ones who had never stopped believing, the ones who were waiting for a sign. She compiled lists. She mapped connections. She built a web of intelligence that would have made the Order of the Phoenix weep with envy. When Voldemort returned in the graveyard at Little Hangleton, Hermione was not surprised. She was ready. Years 5 and 6 and 7 were the war. Hermione Granger became something that no one in the wizarding world had ever seen before. A Muggle-born Slytherin who operated openly in the heart of the Death Eater power structure while secretly funneling information to the Resistance. She attended dinners at Malfoy Manor where Voldemort himself presided at the head of the table, and she sat with perfect posture and a perfect smile and filed away every word that was spoken. She knew which families were wavering. She knew which Death Eaters could be turned. She knew the location of safe houses and supply routes and Horcruxes before Dumbledore even admitted they existed. She was a double agent at 17 years old. The cost was unbearable. She watched classmates die. She watched families she had come to know, even the terrible ones, even the ones who deserved it, be torn apart by a war that made no distinction between the guilty and the innocent. She lost Theodore Nott to a killing curse in the Department of Mysteries, and she did not cry because crying would have broken her cover. She carried his death like a stone in her chest for 3 years. She was the one who told Harry about the Horcruxes. Not Dumbledore. Dumbledore was dead by then, killed by Snape on the astronomy tower in a moment that Hermione had seen coming for months but could not prevent. She told Harry in a dark room in Grimmauld Place, with maps spread across the table and the weight of the entire war pressing down on them. "There are 7, she said. She laid them out. The diary, the ring, the locket, the cup, the diadem, the snake, and the last one, the one he never meant to make, is inside you." Harry looked at her across the table. He had not slept in days. His scar was bleeding almost constantly now, a thin line of red that never quite dried. He was so broken and so tired and so impossibly young. "How do you know?" he asked. "I know everything," Hermione said. It was not a boast. It was the truth, and it cost her something to say it out loud. The Battle of Hogwarts began at midnight. Hermione fought in the dungeons, in the corridors she had walked for 7 years, in the common room where she had learned to survive. She fought with spells she had invented herself, modifications of standard jinxes, defensive charms she had developed during long nights in the library when everyone else was asleep. She fought alongside Slytherins who had chosen to stay, and Gryffindors who had never accepted her, and Ravenclaws who had always wondered why the hat had not chosen them instead. She fought for Theodore, who had been the first person in Slytherin to treat her like an equal. She fought for Harry, who was walking into the Forbidden Forest alone to die. She fought for a world where no 11-year-old girl would ever have to sit on a stool in the Great Hall and hear the word Slytherin and feel her stomach drop through the floor, because she knew what that word meant and what it would cost her. When it was over, when Voldemort was dead and Harry was alive, and the sun rose over a castle that would take years to rebuild, Hermione Granger stood in the wreckage of the Great Hall and looked at the 4 house tables. Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, Slytherin. She had spent 7 years in the snake pit. She had been hated and feared and underestimated. She had become the thing that the Sorting Hat had seen in her. A woman who would do whatever was necessary to win, who would bend every rule and break every expectation and sacrifice anything for the people she loved. She was a Slytherin. And that, she realized as the first light of dawn touched the ruined ceiling, was exactly what the world had needed her to be.